The sun dipped low over the small town of Maplewood, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. Its fading light spilled through the window of a modest bakery on the corner of Main Street, where warm scents of freshly baked bread wafted out into the chilly evening air. Inside, flour dusted the wooden countertops, and the young baker, Liam, wiped his brow with the back of his hand, a tired but satisfied smile playing on his lips. Liam had inherited the bakery from his father, who'd taught him that bread was more than just flour and water. It was a way to bring comfort to those in need, a small kindness that could mean everything on a cold night. Ever since he took over, Liam made it a point to bake extra loaves each day, not for profit, but to give away to those who couldn't afford even a slice. Every evening, just before closing, the doorbell chimed softly as familiar faces shuffled in. Old Mrs. Turner, whose pension barely covered her rent, Mr. Holt, who'd lost his job at the factory, and young mothers with tired eyes and hungry, children clutching at their coats. Liam never asked for anything in return. A warm loaf in trembling hands, a soft "thank you," and the way their eyes lit up. That was enough, but not everyone in town understood. Some whispered that he'd drive himself out of business. Others sneered at him for being naive. But Liam didn't mind. In his heart, he believed that kindness, like bread, was meant to be shared. One bitter evening, as the wind howled down the empty streets, the bell above the bakery door jangled sharply, startling Liam from his thoughts. He looked up, expecting the usual faces. Instead, a stranger stepped in. Tall and broad-shouldered, the man was bundled in a dark coat, his face shadowed by the brim of a worn hat. For a moment, he just stood there, letting the warmth seep into his bones. Liam cleared his throat, forcing a smile. "Come in out of the cold," he called, motioning to the rows of golden brown loaves behind the counter. "Help yourself." The stranger's eyes glinted beneath the shadow of his hat as he approached. But unlike the others, he didn't reach for the bread. His gaze flickered over the bakery, lingering on the worn wooden beams, the flickering light of the back room, and finally settled on Liam. His voice, when he spoke, was smooth and low. "You give this away for free?" Liam nodded, a bit uncertain under the man's steady stare. "To those who need it, yeah, my father used to say, kindness is never wasted." The stranger finished softly, a strange half-smile tugging at his lips. Surprise flickered in Liam's eyes. "You knew my father," but the man didn't answer. Instead, he slid a gloved hand into his coat pocket, pulling out a small crumpled envelope. Without a word, he placed it on the counter. Confused, Liam picked it up, feeling the weight of something inside. "Wait," he started. But the man was already turning away, the door swinging shut behind him with a gust of icy wind. Frowning, Liam tore open the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a simple note, written in a precise, almost old-fashioned script. "Not every debt is repaid in coin." Beneath the note lay a small tarnished key. Liam turned it over in his palm, confusion knitting his brow. There were no markings, nothing to suggest what it might unlock. But as he stood there, the wind rattling the windows and shadows stretching long across the flour-dusted floor, a strange chill settled over him. A feeling that whatever door this key opened, it was something his father had kept hidden for a reason. He glanced at the door, half expecting the stranger to reappear, to offer some explanation. But the street outside was empty, the lamps casting lonely pools of light onto the cobblestones. That night, long after the bakery was dark and the town lay sleeping, Liam lay awake with the key beneath his pillow, its cold weight pressing into his palm. He couldn't shake the stranger's eyes, the way they seemed to see right through him. or the words scrawled in that careful hand. And somewhere, buried beneath layers of flour and memories, something was waiting to be uncovered. Sleep did not come easily that night. Liam stared at the ceiling of his small apartment above the bakery, listening to the wind whisper through the cracks in the windows. The key lay heavy beneath his pillow, its edges pressing into his palm each time he shifted. He tried to convince himself it was just an ordinary key, that the note was some strange prank. But the stranger's eyes haunted him, sharp, knowing, as if he held secrets that Liam had yet to uncover. Morning came slow and grey, dragging clouds that threatened snow. Liam rose early, driven by a restlessness he couldn't shake. Downstairs, the bakery was quiet, the air still carrying the faint warmth of yesterday's ovens. He kneaded dough on autopilot, hands moving through the motions while his mind raced. The key stayed in his pocket all day, the metal cold against his thigh, a constant reminder of the questions clawing at him. By evening, the usual faces came and went, murmuring their thanks as they left with warm loaves cradled in their arms. Liam's eyes flickered to the door each time it opened, half expecting the stranger to return, to explain. But the man did not come back. After closing, Liam paced the small back room, the key turning over and over in his fingers. He tried the obvious first: drawers, cabinets, the old wooden chest that held his father's things. Nothing. Frustration mounted, a tightness in his chest that made it hard to breathe. Finally, on the verge of giving up, his foot caught the edge of a loose floorboard near the storeroom door. He froze, heart pounding. The board lifted with a hollow creak, revealing a small compartment beneath. Inside lay a weathered box, its wood darkened with age, a lock glinting, dull in the shadows. Liam hesitated only a moment before sliding the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, the lid lifting with a soft groan. The sight inside made him suck in a breath. Letters, dozens of them, their edges yellowed and curling, bound with a faded blue ribbon, and beneath them, a photograph. His father, decades younger, arms slung around the shoulders of a man Liam didn't recognize, a man with sharp eyes and a dark coat. Hands trembling, Liam unfolded the first letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. His father's. As he read, the words blurred and twisted, shock stealing the breath from his lungs. Promises, debts, a partnership that wasn't supposed to exist, and a warning: if something happens to me, trust no one. The letters spoke of money borrowed and never repaid, of threats that shadowed the bakery's doorstep. Long before Liam had taken over, names were scrawled hastily in the margins, people Liam had never heard of, and one he had, Victor Hale, a man who now owned half the businesses on Main Street and was known for making problems disappear. A cold realization settled over him. His father's death, sudden, a heart attack they'd said, seemed less like fate and more like a final payment come due. Liam's breath hitched, fist clenching around the letters. The bakery, the free bread, the kindness his father had insisted on. It had all been a way to atone for something Liam had never known. For days, Liam wrestled with the truth alone, exhaustion carving dark hollows under his eyes. He found himself jumping at shadows, eyes flickering to every unfamiliar face that passed by. The bakery felt different now, each corner heavy with secrets. Even the simple act of handing out bread became a question of motive. Was he paying off debts he hadn't owed? And what did the stranger want? He found himself watching Victor Hale from across the street. The man's tailored suits and easy smiles, masking eyes that never quite warmed. Rumors swirled about how Hale had built his empire. Whispers of intimidation, Debts called in when least expected. Liam's jaw clenched each time their paths crossed, the urge to demand answers nearly choking him. But he couldn't risk it. Not yet. Instead, he turned to the letters, searching for something, anything, that might explain why the stranger had appeared now, years after his father's death. One letter, dated just months before his father passed, mentioned a hidden ledger, proof of payments made and owed, tucked away where the sun never reaches. The cellar, Liam realized, heart pounding. Late one night, lantern in hand, Liam descended the narrow stairs into the bakery's cellar. Shadows loomed against the stone walls, the air damp and cold. He moved slowly, boots scuffing the uneven floor, until the light caught on something odd. A brick set slightly off-center in the far wall. With a deep breath, he pried it loose. Behind it lay a small leather-bound book. Dust coated its cover, pages stiff with age, but as Liam flipped it open, the numbers and names that filled each page left little room for doubt. His father's handwriting, each debt recorded in meticulous detail, including one to Victor Hale, marked unpaid and circled in dark ink. Heart thundering, Liam stumbled back, lantern light flickering wildly. Footsteps sounded above, the floorboards, creaking, and Liam's blood turned to ice. He killed the lantern, pressing back into the shadows, breath shallow and ragged. The door at the top of the stairs opened, flooding the darkness with light. A figure stepped in, tall, broad-shouldered, a dark coat brushing the dusty floor. The stranger. Liam's pulse thundered in his ears, but he forced himself to stay silent, lungs burning with each careful breath. The man moved slowly, eyes scanning the cellar, as if he knew exactly what he was looking for. Then, without a word, the stranger turned, leaving the door swinging in his wake. The light above vanished, plunging the cellar back into darkness. But the chill in Liam's bones remained, sharp and unrelenting, as if the shadows themselves had started to close in. In that darkness, clutching the ledger to his chest, Liam understood one thing clearly. He wasn't just paying for his father's mistakes. He was next. Liam stayed in the dark for what felt like hours, breath shallow, fingers trembling around the ledger. Even after the footsteps above faded, he couldn't bring himself to move. The cellar walls seemed to press closer, shadows thick and suffocating. When he finally climbed the stairs, legs unsteady, the bakery was empty, the door swinging softly in the chill night air. The stranger was gone, but his presence lingered like a cold draft. Locking the door, Liam slumped against it, eyes squeezed shut. The ledger lay heavy in his hands, its pages a map of betrayals and debts paid in silence. He knew what he had to do. As long as that book existed, so did proof of Victor Hale's reach. The threats, the money funneled through his father's bakery, the strings that tied half the town to a man who never dirtied his own hands, but going to the authorities meant more than just exposing Hale. It meant dragging his father's name through the mud, tearing open wounds that the town had long since buried. It meant risking everything, his home, the bakery, even his life. Days blurred into each other, the weight of the choice grinding Liam down, dark circles shadowing his eyes. Every time the doorbell chimed, his heart lurched, half expecting the stranger or worse, Victor himself. Sleep came in fitful snatches, dreams twisted with whispers, and sharp-eyed men in dark coats. But guilt gnawed at him, a dull ache that wouldn't fade. His father's words, "Kindness is never wasted," echoed with each loaf he handed out, each grateful smile that faltered when they caught the exhaustion in his eyes. The truth, was a burden too heavy to carry alone, so he made a choice. That evening, as snow dusted the cobblestones and frost traced the windows, Liam took the ledger to Sheriff Carter. The man's eyes narrowed, fingers tightening around the worn leather as he flipped through the pages. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing, just nodded, a grim understanding passing between them. Hours later, the knock on the bakery door shattered. The silence. Liam's breath caught, heart pounding as he cracked it open. But it wasn't the sheriff or a dark-coated stranger. It was Clara, her scarf pulled tight against the cold, eyes wide and fearful. "They've arrested him," she gasped, breath clouding in the icy air. "Victor Hale, there are officers all over Main Street. People are saying it's about..." Her eyes flickered to the bakery, to Liam's vase. Words trailing off. Relief and fear crashed together, leaving Liam dizzy, gripping the doorframe to stay upright. For years, Victor had ruled over Maple Woods, streets with a smile that never reached his eyes. To see him fall felt like breathing after years underwater. But it wasn't over yet. In the days that followed, whispers spread through the town about Hale's network of threats and debts, about the ledger and the young baker who'd exposed it. Some looked at Liam with gratitude, others with suspicion, murmurs following him through the market and past shop windows. The bakery door stayed locked more often than not. Lights dimmed as Liam sorted through his father's past, piecing together the truth from letters and half-faded receipts. The trial came fast, headlines screaming Hale's name, reporters prowling the streets with cameras and notepads. Liam watched from the back of the courtroom, fingers laced together to hide the way they shook. When Hale's gaze met his, cold and steady, even in cuffs, a chill traced down Liam's spine. But the evidence was undeniable. The ledger a nail. In the coffin, guilty. Winter melted into spring, and the bakery doorbell chimed again. Hesitant at first, then steady. Old faces returning with soft smiles and warm thanks. Liam still half expected shadows behind every corner, still woke in the dark hours to phantom footsteps. But bit by bit, the fear ebbed, replaced by something steadier. One evening, long after the sun dipped low, Liam found himself standing by the counter, fingers brushing the edges of the photograph, the one of his father and the stranger, years younger, eyes bright and unburdened. He never learned the man's name, nor how he'd known about the ledger, or why he'd left the key. Maybe some debts were repaid in secrets, instead of coin. But as the door swung open and a young mother with tired eyes stepped in, a shy smile tugging at her lips, Liam set the photograph aside. He reached for a warm loaf, the gesture instinctive now, simple and honest. Some nights, when the streets lay quiet and stars pricked the dark, Liam thought of his father's voice, rough with flour dust and late hours, and the way he'd said kindness was never wasted. And standing there in the soft light of the bakery, the air warm with cinnamon and bread, Liam almost believed it.